Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. In today's video, we'll be going over the different settings for the mechanical and electronic shutter, and also talking about some of the pros and cons between both of these options on your X-T4 camera. The two types of shutters available to choose from on your X-T4 camera have distinct pros and cons, and they are most suited for different types of photography and different situations that you might come across when you're out taking pictures. So to start, it is a good idea to understand the basics of what the shutter actually does on your camera. Now, the shutter on a camera is a very simple job, and that is to open long enough in order for enough light to come into your camera when you take a picture. And then what it does is it closes again up, getting ready to take the next picture. So the X-T4 camera actually has two different types of shutters available. One is a mechanical shutter and the other one is electronic shutter. Now, they both have their distinct advantages and disadvantages, and we'll cover that in a little bit more detail now. Now, the X-T4 camera's mechanical shutter is virtually identical to a shutter that would be found in like an old film camera or a DSLR camera as well. When you take a picture with the mechanical shutter, you'll hear the sound of the mechanical shutter operating, and what it does is it first covers the sensor, and then it'll expose, and it starts the exposure, and then before shutting it for a short time later, it will reload and get ready for taking the next picture. So shutter moves up, shutter moves down, pretty simple. Now, by contrast to the mechanical shutter, the electronic shutter operates just by turning the sensor of your camera on and then off. The electronic shutter there's no moving parts at all, and this gives the electronic shutter kind of two key advantages over a mechanical shutter. Number one is it can be completely silent if you have all the sounds turned off, and number two, there is no shake in that because there's no shutter actually moving. Now, the electronic shutter is especially useful if you want to stay really discreet when you're taking photos, because there's no sound. It's perfect for weddings, it's perfect for street photography and events where situations, that's where the electronic shutter excels in when you're shooting. And it's also good for some long exposures when you want to take pictures with an extra long exposure time. It works quite well with that as well. And electronic shutters can also actually offer a much faster shutter speed, up to, on the Fuji camera, 1/32,000th of a second. And the continuous shooting speed, you can actually increase up to 30 frames per second on the X-T4 camera. So very fast shooting. So at this point, you're probably thinking, well, if mirrorless cameras, why don't we just use the electronic shutter all the time? It sounds like it's much better than the mechanical, but the technology behind image sensors kind of means there's some limitations that mechanical shutters are actually better for. So when you do take a picture, this is how the electronic shutter works. Image data is read from your camera sensor basically line by line, and not all in one go like it would with a mechanical shutter. So this means the electronic shutter ends an exposure. There's actually a short time of delay. It's very, very short, 1/200th of a second between the top of the frame and the very bottom. And what this will cause is something called rolling shutter. So for the most part, with electronic shutter, rolling shutters, they work just fine for most situations, but there's some where they're not suitable. And these are if you're taking pictures with a lot of fast moving scenes or subjects. There's often a time for the subject to move slightly from when the electronic shutter goes from line to line, and this can cause actually some weird kind of effects in your end photo when you're looking at it. So one example, perfect example to look at this would be to take a look at, if you're taking a picture of a airplane's propellers moving, they would look a bit curved on your picture. And when you're taking pictures like fast moving action, mechanical shutters will still perform better for these situations, because they do a better job at freezing the movement at a point of time where everything will be perfectly still. Now, while the X-T4 doesn't have a built-in flash, it's worth noting that a flash can't be used with electronic shutters as well. The burst of the flash is so short that it wouldn't illuminate the scene for long enough for all of the lines to get basically the sensor to read if you're using electronic shutter. So that's where mechanical shutter would come in as well. On the X-T4, to make things even a little bit more confusing, you can actually find a hybrid shutter mode called E front shutter curtain. This uses the electronic shutter to start the exposure, thereby you would avoid any of the camera shake involved with that, with the mechanical shutter. But then what it does is it uses the mechanical shutter to end the exposure, and that would avoid the flickering like motion effect from like the propeller blades, for example. So in many ways, this is kind of an ideal balance between electronic and mechanical, because it kind of combines some of the best advantages of both. Although not all. I guess it's one thing to be aware of is the electronic front shutter curtain is not completely silent like the electronic shutter. So if you're in a situation where you want to be completely silent, you wouldn't want to use this setting as well. And it also can't be used with a flash. So there's pros and cons to both. And now, to make things even more confusing, there is a Fuji X-T4 setting that has an option available that basically auto switches between all of these different modes: electronic, manual, or front curtain shutter is chosen automatically depending on the shutter speed that you used. This is a good option if you want to choose a shutter setting on your camera that is set, and then you can totally forget about it. But if you do like to choose the different shutter modes yourself when you need to, that's kind of what I like to recommend. That way you can take advantages of each shutter type that you are out taking pictures. Now, to access all of the different shutter types in your Fuji X-T4 camera, you want to go into the menu system and select the camera icon. Scroll down until you'll see the shutter that is selected. Typically it's going to be a mechanical shutter, and then here you can go in, select, and choose the different shutter types that we talked about: mechanical shutter, electronic front shutter, but then you can also choose the different options and auto options as well. Now, when you do scroll through this, you will see that there is some different suggestions down on the menu system, and it will actually tell you what some of the best shooting situations this type of shutter is used for. So it's quite helpful. If you can't quite remember, you're not quite sure, the menu system does a really good job at explaining what the different shutter types are for as well. If you have any questions about the different shutter options available on your X-T4, we covered everything fairly quickly in this video, but if you have a question, please let me know down below in the comments. As always, if you did find this video useful, hit the like button. It lets me know you liked the video. And finally, if you haven't subscribed already, please consider subscribing and clicking on the bell notification button. You will get notified of new videos that I post, and I will see you in the next one. Thanks for watching, everybody. Have a great day.